Microsoft recently released its own Playwright tool package for MCP, but unfortunately for me, the library is written in TypeScript, and I don't know a single line of TypeScript. So I thought I'd create my own Playwright MCP tool package to be used with Claude Desktop to automate my browser. In this video, I will share exactly how to build a Playwright MCP server in Python to give Claude Desktop all the tools to automate a browser. If you don't know what Playwright is an open source framework for browser automation. It can control browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Safari through code, letting you automate web interactions that you would normally do manually. It's essentially a way for your code to browse websites just like a person would, navigating pages, clicking buttons, and handling all sorts of web content. And with Playwright, you can automate virtually any browser-based task. You can fill forms, click buttons, capture screenshots, navigate through complex web applications, and extract data through web scraping. And unlike traditional scraping with HTTP GET requests and beautiful soup that only fetch static HTML, Playwright renders the full page, including JavaScript. This means you can scrape dynamic content that's loaded after the page loads or requires interaction, something regular scrapers just can't handle. Alright, so the thing is, because there are so many actions you can perform with Playwright, I create a little more than 20 functions that I think will be useful to be used with Claude Desktop. If there are any functions you think would be helpful, leave them in the comments below. Now let me show you a few demos using Playwright in Claude Desktop before we dive into the MCP server development. So for me, most of the things I do with the Playwright tools in Claude Desktop are usually involving web scraping to bypass anti-bot detection on web pages that I can access using regular HTTP requests. One main purpose is to add more context to help the Claude model generate a more accurate and detailed response. For instance, here I have a prompt to instruct Claude to use the extract web page content markdown tool from the General Tools MCP server to scrape a Zillow's page for the property details and save the details as a markdown file in my local directory. If I send the request, we can see that the request is blocked by Zillow, likely due to their anti-scraping measures designed to protect their data and stop bots from accessing it. Now, if I switch to using Playwright tools, which simulates a real browser environment, we no longer get blocked, and we are able to scrape the content generated from JavaScript. And if we look at the markdown file generated from Claude, here's the property listing details from Zillow's page, which has just about everything from interior details to price history. Another use case is you can have Claude perform actions like navigating to a web page, fill out a field, and return the result. Here I have this prompt to instruct Claude to use tools from Playwright server to navigate to Wikipedia's website, do a search for Japan, and take a screenshot of the page and save the summary in a markdown file in my local directory. Now let's run the request. First, Claude is going to launch a browser. It will then locate the search field and use a function called browser fill to populate the search query and press Enter key to return. Once it gets to the target page, it then takes a screenshot, summarizes the page, and saves everything to my local directory. A very multi-purpose tool that can greatly improve productivity and change the way how you use Claude Desktop. That's all for the demo. Now let's dive into how to develop the Playwright MCP server in Python. In your project directory, launch a terminal and run the command to install MCP, nestasync.io, psutil, and Playwright Python libraries. Once the Python libraries are installed, we need to install Playwright drivers. To install the drivers, run the command playwright install, and this will install the driver for Firefox, Chrome, and WebKit. A Playwright driver is just a component used to launch and control web browsers for automation purposes. Now, in your code editor, create a Python file called mcp-playwright-tools.py in the project directory. So there are already a bunch of tutorials out there teaching you how to use Playwright in Python. I'm only going to briefly go through the source code, like how to use each function and how to set up the Playwright MCP server for Claude Desktop. If you have any specific questions, you can ask in the comments below. All right, to start, import the Python dependencies. In Python, when you try to run an asynchronous event loop inside another event loop, you'll encounter a runtime error. Here, call the nest async IOApply method to patch this limitation, allowing nested event loops to run smoothly when we launch the MCP server. Next, set up the logger. This is going to be a little bit advanced if you're not familiar with writing Python class. If you only care about the usage, you can just copy and paste. Create a class called Playwright Manager with the two methods shown here. We're going to use this class to initiate a Playwright browser instance with only the core functions. If we look at the parameters in the init method, when we create a Playwright Manager object, we can specify which browser we want to use, whether we want the browser to be visible while running, and set the browser window size when launching. By setting the headless mode to false, it allows the browser to run in normal mode, meaning you can see the browser window and its actions in real time when Claude is operating it. To physically launch a browser, create an async method called ensureBrowser to create a browser page. Inside the method, we are just creating a Playwright object, launching a browser, and adding a page, with the page object as the output. In Playwright, a page is the same thing as a browser tab. The viewport here controls the browser window size. Depending on your monitor's resolution, you may need to adjust it accordingly. Alternatively, you can make the viewport dynamic by adding a procedure that retrieves the monitor's resolution and calculates a ratio to return the appropriate dimensions. The context object represents an isolated browser session with its own settings, cookies, and cache, allowing multiple independent page sessions within a single browser instance. This is useful if you need to simulate different scenarios or manage multiple independent browser states without the overhead of launching multiple browser instances. And the async close method will terminate all the resources to ensure they don't consume memory in the background. That's basically the Playwright boilerplate for us to get started using Playwright Python package. Now let's create the Playwright MCP server object using the FastMCP class. The name property is the server name, which is what will be displayed in the MCP available tools list in Claude Desktop. Dependencies are third-party Python libraries that need to be included for the server to operate. Here, let's go ahead and create an instance of the Playwright Manager object and a variable to store the current working directory. To register a function to an MCP server, from the MCP object, use the tool decorator to register a function, and use the name and description parameters to describe the function. If you leave the name and description fields blank, Claude Desktop will use the function name instead as the name to be displayed. Now, the browser navigate function here is probably one of the most important functions in the toolset. The browser navigate function takes a URL, launches a browser, and navigates to that URL. And just in case, if the browser instance didn't already exist, for example, if you've started a new chat session but accidentally closed the browser, The function will recreate the browser session. As I mentioned before, I created quite many Playwright tool functions in the Playwright MCP server, and you probably don't need all of them. Depending on your use case, I would recommend you comment out the functions you don't need. Also, Playwright is considered as an advanced framework in Python. And since I already written the code, all you need to know is what each function does. As I go through the rest of the functions, I will focus mainly on what each function does and anything important in the code you need to know. The browser close function shuts down all the browser processes and frees up system resources of a Playwright object. The kill all Chrome instances function terminates all the Chrome instances created by Playwright that are running in the process. The reason I have this function is because sometimes when you close a browser or if you launch a browser in headless mode and forgot to close the browser instance, the processes will still run in the background, taking up resources. The kill all Chrome instances function will ensure all the resources are terminated. And those are the 3 required functions in the Playwright MCP server. The remaining functions I'm about to share are optional. You can comment out any functions that aren't useful to you. Moving on. The browser field function enters text into a form field identified by a selector. A selector is the HTML pattern used to locate a specific element. The browser find by XPath is probably one of the useful functions to include if you do a lot of web scraping work with Claude. The function counts how many elements match a specific XPath query to help verify if certain elements exist on a web page before proceeding with automation, or check the number of duplicated elements. The browser go back function will go back to the previous page. The browser reload function will refresh the page. The browser click function clicks on element identified by a selector. Usually, you will use this function to locate a clickable element like a drop-down or a button and interact with the element. The browser save as PDF function will save the current web page as a PDF file. Right now, the function is Chrome specific, since other drivers require different setup to save a page as PDF file. The browser screenshot function will capture an image of the current page or a specific element. The browser scroll to top function will scroll to the top of the page. I think I may forget to include the scroll to bottom function. After the video, I will update the source code, and I will put the link in the description below. The browser scroll to element function works similar to the browser scroll to top function, except with this function, it will scroll the page to a specific location based on the element. The getCurrentURL function will return the URL of the current page. The getElementHTML function will extract and return the HTML markup from an element specified by the XPath query. Usually, I will use this function to save or extract a specific element in a web page. For instance, on Google Maps, there are different components make up to the page, and I can use this function to return the HTML of a specific component instead of the entire page. One main reason to use this function in Claude Desktop is to reduce input context size, since some page has crazy number of HTML markups. The getElementText works similar as the getElementHTML function, except this function returns the text content associated to an element instead of HTML markups. The getPageContent function returns all the visible text from a web page. The getPageHTML function works similarly, except it returns the HTML markup instead. The getPageTitle function will return the title of the current web page. The SaveElementAsHTML function extracts and saves the HTML content from a specific element to a file based on an XPath query. The SavePageAsHTML function will save the current web page as HTML file. The SavePageScreenshot function captures and saves an image of the current web page. The clearField function clears an input field based on an element identified by an XPath query. The browser press key function is another really useful function. The function simulates pressing a specific keyboard key. You use the function to perform the typing action or key press action like pressing the Enter key or Tab key. And the last function, browser scroll one step, will scroll the page by a specified number of distances. Usually, I will use this function to load lazy loaded content, like the YouTube comments, or websites use Ajax to render the content. So I decided to comment out the clear browser data and get cookies functions since I can't find any use yet. But I'm leaving them there just in case you ever need them in the future. And in the last step, trigger the MCP server with the MCP run method. At this point, we have officially finished developing the Playwright MCP server. The next step is to add the MCP server to Claude Desktop. Now let me remove the existing Playwright server in my Claude Desktop first. To add the Playwright MCP server to Claude Desktop, in the terminal run the command mcp install, followed by the Python file name. If installation is successful, you should see a log says, successfully install Playwright tools in Claude app. Now restart your Claude Desktop. If you check on the available MCP tools, you should see the functions from the Playwright MCP server is now listed. And here's the Playwright prompt in my Playwright environment project. And here's the rest of the prompt. Again, if you are a Patreon member, you can download all the resources from the link in the description below. Now in Claude Desktop, let me give Claude a task to ensure the Playwright functions work. For the task, let's just have Claude navigate to an eBay listing and save the page as an HTML file in a local folder. We can see the browser is launched successfully with the eBay listing I specified. It then checks a few things to ensure the target page is correct. So here in my local folder, I can see that it saved a screenshot as well, but ultimately it saved the page as HTML file to my local folder as requested. Again, there are so many use cases and automation you can do with Playwright. If you have any suggestions on tutorial ideas or functions, leave them in the comments below. And that concludes this Playwright MCP server development walkthrough for Claude Desktop. I hope you find the video useful. If there are any tutorial ideas you have in mind and you would like me to cover, please leave them in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Happy coding. See you in the next one.